honey.
Oh my goodness, you are so beautiful. You're radiant.
Oh, it's this damn TikTok light.
I'm so excited to have you. I really am. And when I say it's such an honor, I know I keep saying that in our text messages back and forth, but it really is an honor to have you today. And I'm really excited for the eavesdroppers who are listening to introduce a guest who is not only a best-selling author, but also a true embodiment of courage and transformation, Kristin Birdwell. Kristin's journey as a heartbreakingly raw and real as it is captured in her book, Sex, Drugs, and Soul, which is my latest, most captivating read. And that's why I have her on today to just ask her some questions about the process, one author to another. And so I'm so excited to have you. And I have to open with the same question I ask every guest, which is, hello, hi, who are you? How do we know each other, and where can people find you online?
Well, thank you for that welcome. That makes me feel really good inside. I'm happy to be here. I am Kristin Birdwell, Texan storyteller, creative, adventurous person. Part of me is still figuring out who I am too. I think that's an ongoing thing as being a seeker. But yeah, I'm an author, podcast host. I also help shepherd stories in the world, like editing and ghostwriting. You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, my website, Amazon, podcast, all those things. But I think we met, I would say, like through the beauty or through the beautiful connection of social media, really through the interwebs and like a friend connecting us, which I think is awesome. So we haven't met like IRL in real life yet, but we've met virtually a few times. And I just love following your journey on social media too.
I agree. I mean, I know there's so much flack that people give social media because of it just goes dark, right? I think anything within a human experience, we have this beautiful capability to make it very dark. One author to another. I think that's just such a testament. And I say it over and over again because it's my passion is storytelling, right? So when we tell our stories on social media, we are exposing ourselves to vulnerability, but then we can attract our people as well. When we got connected and you sent me your book, I don't even know that my book was on my radar. It's so weird to think about that too. Did I say, hi, I'm thinking of writing a book? I don't think I
think
did.
so. I mean, I think that you were, I don't know what stage in the process you were. I think though that you had found or signed or whatever with your or connected with your publisher. And so it's kind of cool to like have gone on the journey, but also like watch someone else go on their own journey and have like their own highs and lows. And I think you had pushed it back or something. I'm not sure of all the details, but I was like, when am I going to get this book? Because I've loved your humor and your personality. And so I automatically wanted to read.
Yeah. And my book has neither of those. No humor, no personality. I will say like that is the weird, I know, right? Well, it's a lot more dry than I think people would expect. And this is where I fell in love with your book. And I quite literally, I'm not kidding, fell to my knees. I was wrapping Christmas presents, so it was in December. And when I finished your book, I just felt completely honored that you opened yourself up and you were so vulnerable. But even furthermore, because I had just published my book the month prior, I was hyper aware of the tenacity required to publish a book. I wasn't willing to get that vulnerable, even though I am on my social media very open. I was not willing to go to the depths that you brought forth. Because I wanted to understand the process a lot more before actually then adding my heart and soul into it. So that's why my first book is really dry, and that's the feedback that I've gotten. It's been overwhelmingly positive, but that has been the piece that I think even you gave the feedback was I would have liked more personal stories. And I think that's what everybody says because they're expecting a total dark and dirty tell-all, which is absolutely my vibe. But I was like, I need to just grip this process before I also add that layer. And the fact that for your, we'll put it in quotation marks, first publication that you
Oh
were able to
yeah.
do that, it really just was so awe-inspiring because I have an idea. I won't say I know, but I have an idea of what that requires and how taxing that can be emotionally. Then you add that it's your personal memoir and that there are all these various characters that we're going to talk about. And I say characters again in
Mm-hmm.
quotations, because I know some pseudonyms were used, but these characters and how you tell their role in your story and just staying authentic to your story while also possibly, we'll say, harming someone else in the process. I really appreciate all of that because quite frankly, I didn't do it. I stepped away from all that. I was like, I'm not going to put that in there. I'm going to do the y'all a favor and not throw out the dirty laundry yet. So, I mean, on that note, your book touches on some deeply personal and challenging experiences. Some were really hard to get through. And can you share what it was like to revisit those moments while you were writing and how you navigated relaying these experiences with such honesty?
Oh, for sure. I will say that for like writing is and has always been my permission slip. And I'm a highly sensitive, like super sensitive person, probably more sensitive than I like to admit. But now I believe it to be a superpower. But it gave me the gift of feeling like what I had suppressed in my past. And, there would be some days where I was like crying and typing as I revisited or navigating. And I actually came across something yesterday and I was like, okay, I've got to share this because I think that's so, when I read this, it resonated like, yes, this is how it felt. It's from The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. And he says, for those called to art who do struggle with an overwhelming sensitivity, the creative process can have a therapeutic power. It offers a sense of deep connection, a safe place to voice the unspeakable and bare their soul. And in these cases, art does not unravel the maker, it makes them whole. And I'm like, that's how it felt. It felt like I was recollecting like all these pieces of myself that had been like, shattered or fragmented along the way. And I got to go revisit and reclaim those like parts of myself. And that like brings tears to my eyes. And so it was very healing and cathartic for me. And so there was like an alchemical process too of also seeing what and looking at it through a different lens. Like in the moment, I was like, okay, yes, this happened to me, but I was able to like go back and see how each point brought me to the next and how it worked for me. I learned over time to create like a kind of curiosity around resistance because there was like one element of my book, namely like whenever I get interviewed by detectives and one of the guys I was dating hired a hitman, I wanted to skim over that. I was like, that's not part of my story. I didn't want to revisit that. But I learned because if I automatically knee-jerkingly resist something, like what else is there for me? Like to look at it with a little bit more curiosity. And so during that time, I had a dream like right around the time I was going to be writing that section. And it had those people in my dream. And it just kind of brought up feelings of resentment or like feelings of like, oh, I still needed to work on forgiveness for them. And so that all played into it. I also had to like release the reader in some ways. Like, yes, I wrote it for like someone going through a hard time or like a younger version of myself. But in some ways I had to write it as if nobody was going to read this thing, to be honest. And then my editor also challenged me in the notes, like with questions. I would send her 20 pages at a time. And so she would ask me probing questions to kind of align like my inner emotional life with the exterior event. And then when we got to the editing phase, or as I got closer to publication, I shared pages with people. I asked them if they were going to be willing to keep their name the same or if they wanted me to change it. If I didn't have contact with them anymore, I just automatically changed the name. And then I will also say that, like with my dad, there is a lot of freedom in the fact that he's gone or not in this physical state anymore. So there was like a little bit of freedom there, and that or just honoring, or that I feel like he would have been proud that I was honoring my creative desires. And he didn't have to read all like the sexy little bits about me, and he could say like,
Yeah.
So there was freedom in there too. So just
I will. Yeah, and I'm really glad that you touched upon your dad because I am a daddy's girl and I am pretty open unapologetically about the fact that that's my Achilles heel. The father-daughter dynamic is so, I've done 2 podcast episodes with my dad. And because the father-daughter dynamic to me is just so precious and so not amplified and cherished in a way that I really think it could be in the society. And I think the fault is to some extent fathers of our society, and their shortcomings, but also I think our shortcomings as a society, and recognizing and honoring fathers the way that we do give a lot of grace and clout to mothers in the parenthood discussion. And I was heartbroken to hear that he passes away, because I didn't know that, and I didn't know if that was a spoiler. But I can completely appreciate why you would have a little bit of relief that you can share such raw sides, especially on the sexuality front, to yourself. But then I have to imagine that there's also this bit of regret that he didn't get to read the book, or do you feel like he knows it in an all-encompassing way in the state that he is now, that he can glean from it what's important and support and light you? Like, how was that journey writing both about him and your experiences in his absence? I was super curious about that, because I've talked to that about a few of my friends who have either lost a parent or on the verge of losing a parent. And this idea of writing a vulnerable book and what that could mean in our current season, knowing that life is fleeting. Would you mind expanding on that a little bit?
Oh, yeah. And it's interesting, like I feel different things for each of the father roles in my life, like my biological dad and then my stepfather as well, like who both play a pivotal role in the book. And in my life in general. I'm like, it's interesting to like navigate those terms. With my dad, I think that there's just a sense of knowingness, or maybe through some like since his passing, connections that we've had, whether it's been, ethereal or through dreams or through mushroom-like states or whatever it's been. It's just like a kind of a knowingness of unconditional love and support. With my stepdad, however, there was like a lot of anger and grief, and because interestingly enough, like I wrote the book and he was alive. And so I wrote the book from the perspective that my stepdad was alive, that he would read my words, and all of that. About after I finished the first draft, and then like a month afterwards, he died. This was like August 2020. And so then in some ways that was a gift, because it's like, okay, I got the gift of writing the book because he was alive. But I also got the gift of like reprocessing and going back through it with the idea of him being gone. There's also a lot of like grief and anger and emotions I had to process, and but I felt like I needed to navigate before I published it, which I feel like it probably pushed the publication date back a little bit. And interestingly enough, though, too, like he and I used to always have these like dad and daughter dates, and like I was leaving a work event. And I was in the airport, and I don't know, something like just kind of told me, I'm like, that guy is going to buy my lunch at the airport. And I had asked for like a sign, and I was like reading this book, like Many Lives, Many Masters. It talks about soul agreements and coming into life and having agreements with the people that, impact our ways in negative and positive ways. And I just kind of saw it as all being for the greater good of sharing my story with the world. And then that guy ended up buying my lunch, and the waitress came over. She's like, hey, that guy wanted to take care of your lunch. He said you reminded him of his daughter. And this is like a few days after his passing. And I just felt like it was very much a sign from God, the universe, whatever you want to call it. And then, and so since then, it's like I put like verbiage or language to the feeling of the sense that he would never get to read my words, that he would never see how pivotal his role played in my journey, in the negative and in the positive ways. And since then, it's like there's like a sense of knowingness in our agreement or bond, but there's also, to me, like a lot of, human happiness or satisfaction that he sacrificed in this life too. So it's been an interesting thing to navigate.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're both, especially your stepfather. I was so touched by the story in the beginning. because I don't have a step parent, so it's a concept that's relatively foreign to me,
Mm.
and yet I think so not underscored enough actually in our society. And more recently, it's just been top of my mind for a bunch of reasons. Like around Christmas, like the week of Christmas for Mass, the whole sermon was about Joseph, which was so weird and random because I've never heard Christmas told from the perspective of this guy, Joseph, whose wife is like knocked up by some other dude, right? When you put it in that way. And it's like, yo, here's the situation. I knocked up your wife. Actually, she's not even your wife yet. She's your fiance. She's a virgin. I knocked her up, and that baby is about to save the whole world, and you better keep him safe. Like,
Wow.
that's a lot of pressure, you know? And Joseph is like the ultimate stepdad. And so it's been really top of mind because I've never, like I said, I've never heard the Christmas story kind of told in that perspective and context, and thinking about step parents and the impact they can have on us. We give a lot of clout to teachers and coaches. And how about those parental figures in our lives that aren't blood relatives but impact us? And so how you talked about your life transforming, you were like, it might not have been him, but it just felt like he showed up and all of a sudden I had better vision because I'm getting eyeglasses, and life just seemed brighter and easier when he entered the role. I mean, I loved how you painted that. And then staying true to some of the pitfalls of your relationship and grave disappointments. I mean, I was gravely disappointed, and I think I told you I read the book twice, and like, you're not the same as a reader. You're just not the same reader. It was like not necessarily as enjoyable. Like I kind of had a little bit of a duality of me, and just an appreciation of your writing about him. Because you did such a beautiful job, and I did not realize that he passed as well. So to lose these two men in your life, like, I think that might give more understanding to something that I kind of grasp onto. And I don't know if this was intentional, but it was something that I noticed as like this, we'll call it very hyperbolically man-hating feminist that I am, which is I noticed that in several of your stories, if not most of them, you're having a concern, you're having an issue, and it's a man that comes to the rescue almost every single time. If you're not rescuing yourself, like I can't really recall like a female hero within the story. And yet within the various stories, we see that a man is often appearing to save you from a difficult circumstance, especially the one and only Bradley, which I think we could probably spend a whole hour talking about him alone. And arguably a main character of your story.
Oh, for sure.
Was this a conscious narrative choice to really have these men come and save you and be your hero? Even when you're in California and you have these different men in your life at different times. And then for you, especially within the context of Bradley, you know, how do you kind of perceive that line between someone protecting you, which we all deserve protection and we all deserve to feel safe and have a partner or friend or father figure that protects us, but then also that fine line to where it can become control, which is what I do think we see within your dynamic with Bradley specifically. Was that conscious for you, or is that a little, am I making too much?
No, it's really interesting. You picked some like a really good questions because they really highlight some of the things that it's like I navigated either while writing it or before writing it, or, you know, there's so many different layers. And I don't know if it was a conscious choice about writing about the role of saving until I think it might have been discovered through the process of writing it and reading like personal development books that resonated. And then it was structured in that way because it was like, oh, snap. I was creating these situations in my life for these men to show up in these certain ways, or giving them the opportunity that I maybe wanted my dad to show up for me in some way. Rescue his little girl. There was definitely at some point like an aha moment around like Disney conditioning. What I call Disney conditioning is like that knight in shining armor coming to save the day and that sort of thing. And ultimately, like later on, it's like my dark nights of the soul is kind of what saved me, or like what showed me that I could show up for myself, or like going on that journey. And so like reflecting on it, I can totally see like, oh, wow, he used that as a means of a way to control my behavior, or like because he did this, it made me more likely to act in certain ways, like A or B. And so there definitely was like, if he was sending money to my account or something, I felt like obligated to hang out with him. Just like certain things like that too, that was a way of manipulating behavior or controlling things. And so, but reflecting on it, it's like there's a part of me that did want that sense of safety or protection or that sort of thing. I just had to learn how to give it to myself in certain ways.
Well, and you say towards the end of the book, I never learned to choose myself. I've never learned to choose myself. And I that really struck me. And I was curious, if you could elaborate on what you meant by that, and then maybe let us know, how are you choosing yourself today? And how might you suggest that a woman, be it a less experienced version of yourself, or a woman like me who might not even be aware that she's not choosing herself, like how do we recognize whether or not we are choosing ourselves in our decision making, and how can we start to learn how to prioritize that, like what that actually means?
Mm-hmm. I think it was modeled for me in certain ways. Like when I think of like the men my mom chose, or like to place so much value on that external like validation, whether it was like men or the substances or experiences or that sort of thing, and thinking that they were going to provide like the love, acceptance, or happiness for me. And so I really had to learn like how to choose myself and become that source of love and acceptance for myself. I think it manifests in like a myriad of ways in women, and I'll share like how it manifested for me. It like an overall feeling of disconnection or discontent, feeling overextended, always wanting to make someone else happy, and like that being a key factor for where I felt satisfied or gratified. And so then I also kind of see like the people pleasing side of things too. And it's like, to me, that's even like subconscious manipulation to get someone to love or accept me or that sort of thing. It also showed up in of ways of not feeling enough or striving from a place of not feeling like I was enough. And all of these also, I will say, like served me in ways too. Like I got good grades. Like I went to college. I strove and like succeeded and knocked things off my checklist and my to-do list. But at the same time, like I'd always yearned for a little bit more softening. And I think for so many years, my masculine energy served as a protector for my feminine energy because I didn't feel safe. So now it's like communicating that safety to myself. Cultivating self-awareness, like asking myself questions. Like one of the questions that I love is like, what is nourishing for me? That's going to change in this moment today versus yesterday. Yesterday, it's like sauna and dark chocolate and horizontal time because I've been feeling a little bit overextended and like kind of rebalancing and recentering. Sometimes that's binge watching stuff. Like sometimes that's nourishing for me. Sometimes I want to disconnect from and just do like little scrolling on TikTok. Like sometimes that's nourishing for me, which sounds like a little wonky, I guess, in some aspects, but at the same time, I see it as also a way of like giving myself a little grace and compassion and space to be human because we're messy and we're imperfect, and like releasing that sense of like, oh my God, I got to do things a certain way or it's not okay. I also think that like taking care of our bodies is really important, and like that helps communicate these mental understandings into our body. So I like self-touch. I like nurturing. I'm like rubbing my arms. I like soothing gestures. I like dancing. I like anything that uses like breath, sound, and movement, and body-based practices like yoga and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Breath, sound, and movement. I feel like that could be the title for your next book.
Maybe.
Breath, sound, and movement. Sounds very sexual and active. No, I mean, I definitely resonate with that as well. And that's why, again, I say in quotations, right, like man, hate, and feminist, because exactly what you said. I have my entire life leaned into my masculine energy to be the driver, be someone who is succeeding and achieving and acquiring and work, especially. But then even in my personal life, to kind of not have the appearance of, we'll call it feminine or vulnerable, weak, soft. So I appear almost impenetrable, but I don't know that that's always served me. And I think when we look, especially at women in society, right? Like we are people pleasers in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
Like our bodies were built to serve and feed. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, like, you know, like when you look at it like that, right? Our bodies are built to give birth and feed the humans. Like men's bodies aren't built that way. And I think when you take it to even that level of where the people pleasing might begin, we have a grasp of that at a very young age.
Mm.
I know,
Good
God
point.
forbid, we talk about the difference of sexes in today's world, but in general, what I'm saying applies to most women
Yeah.
today. And I think that, you know, taking it a step further, when you say taking care of ourselves physically, right? Like, what does that actually look like? We know that physically, there are a lot of implications of what women should look like and
Mm.
be like and how we
Oh.
appear in the world. And I will say that, like, in your book, a theme that I saw pop up over and over again was the theme of beauty, right? Both as a societal value and where, you know, someone might externally look at you and put value upon you as the
Mm-hmm.
narrator, but then also a personal perception of like this recurrence of you're beautiful and I'm going to come after you and I'm interested in you and I'm attracted to you. And at all costs, I'm going to blank you, blank with you, or something to you, right? I would see this theme of beauty coming up. Can you talk a little bit about maybe what beauty meant to you in those moments, or how maybe your beauty may have been weaponized, or even on the opposite side, like what beauty means to you today, and where, you know, your beauty and self-perception of your beauty is today without
Mm-hmm.
that, as to quote you, external validation.
Mm-hmm. It's a good question because it's such a pivotal like theme, I think, in the book and in my life. And while I was writing it, I was writing the book, I was playing with different like subtitles and it changed several times. But one of the ones that I played with was Waking the Sleeping Beauty Within because of the Disney conditioning and because of like, okay, I really want to like hone in on the point of like, really, it's about self love and like awakening that and finding it for myself and like realizing that it's like an ongoing process, not a one thing said or done. Like there's definitely like highs and lows that I've experienced within that. And I feel like there's layers and depth to this question, which ultimately I think now that depth and intimacy and connection is what I value and is beautiful to me today. I'm not able to have that unless I am willing to be open and honest and vulnerable. And you know, so it's a little bit of a crux sometimes if someone only sees you for your surface level beauty, but you're also yearning for this deep level connection and intimacy and depth. And so for that reason, and like other reasons too, I think that beauty is or can be a double-edged sword because it can be objectified. I objectified myself and I had men objectify me. It also gives you like tons of access and privileges and, you know, opens doors to opportunities and experiences that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So I think that there also is an assumption though that because someone is beautiful, they've never experienced adversity. And so I'm like, I like to paint a little bit of all of it. Ultimately, though, today I see it as a gift versus a commodity. And it's like, how am I going to use that gift? Am I going to do things that make me uncomfortable and stretch my comfort zone, stretch me out of my comfort zone, like anything to do with speaking? I'm a writer. I like to hibernate and be introverted and write, you know, and probably be like on a mountain somewhere, you know, like that's kind of like my natural proclivity, like what I'm drawn towards. But then, like, stretching me is like, okay, maybe people do listen to someone that is attractive, or maybe they will, you know, turn that on or stay for a second more longer on social media. So like, how am I going to use that to amplify my message or spread a gift or like have it be of service. And I say all that with also saying like, I have a skincare routine. I have sensitivities around aging, around youthfulness. Like I want to maintain like youthfulness and appearance and all that stuff too. So I think it's a balance. And I think it's a balance of also like I used to work out and only do it to look a certain way. Now I work out because I know it also like makes me feel good. And I used to work out for only like the appearance of how others would perceive me. But now it's like, okay, this gives me energy. This like helps me feel stronger. This taps me into myself, like strengthens my mind body connection. So a little bit different ways of navigating some of the aspects.
Yeah, I got into a heated kind of discussion, debate topic with somebody, and I'll just oversimplify that the expectation was, or the kind of the takeaway where we landed was like, in general, as a society, we look at men for what they're producing, what they make, what they provide. And as women, I think and experience at a, again, very basic, high level, we value their looks. And so today, you know, if we look at someone who's beautiful, and I think Hollywood is a perfect example of that. I talked about this in my last podcast with Jonna, is that you kind of have to look at someone and say, okay, you have this natural gift. You didn't technically do too much for it, but what is it being leveraged for exactly?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is it something that we're using to, I love how you called it a commodity where I'm just trading it? Okay, or can I use this beauty to attract a particular audience, listener, whatever, and bring a message of hope, faith, resilience, balance, health, whatever it may be. And maybe it resonates a little bit more. And I would say that it's the latter, that it is our job as people to use our talents and gifts, whatever they may be, including, whether we like it or not, attractiveness, to do greater good. And I think that
too. Like, well, I agree. Like, I don't mean to cut you off, but like, it's like, it is a responsibility, whether it's beauty or something else. And like my boyfriend calls them like the Peter Parker rules. Like if you're given a gift, like how are you going to use it? It is a responsibility for you to use it.
I absolutely agree. I'm super excited about your next chapter, no pun intended. I mean, reading your book, I loved it. I will say, at the end of every chapter, I was on the edge of my seat, just hoping it wasn't the final chapter. Like that's all I kept doing, because you had this very, I'm going to call it strategic, because I can't imagine that it was an accident. You had this very strategic way of like, there's a cliffhanger, right? Where it's like something said, and then possibly you want to know what's on the other side of it. But how you were ending and closing your chapters, and it was something I struggled with in my writing of my book, High Tolerance, is like the way that you closed your chapters almost felt like it could have been the end of the book, and it would have been a full, wonderful book. But then there was still more I wanted to know. Not in a cliffhanger, and then she saw a stranger with a gun. Like, not like that, but just in a, wait, but I still want to know more, right? And then when it was finally the end, I'm like, oh no, I'm not ready. And then when I read it the second time, I had the same sensation of, no, this isn't where it ends, right? We still haven't heard this part. Okay, it's not over. It's not over. I had this constant fear of abandonment as a reader. I was like, she's going to abandon me. Was that a strategic way of framing your chapters? It's so interesting to hear that you were writing, 20 pages at a time and then sending it to your editor. That is not how I did my book. I actually wrote my entire book with my publisher and then sent it to editing. So I'm super curious how, and that was just to create the framework and the outline, just to feel good about the order of the book before going into editing and then trying to piece it together. And I think it's just different, methodologies. I don't think one's necessarily better or worse. Yours was, of course, better. You're an experienced writer. But I'm wondering, like, if that was a part of that, was that intentional to kind of end these chapters with such, I don't know if a hook is the right way. I was certainly hooked, but just like this, like, don't leave, keep going.
I don't want to, I'm like, I hope I didn't incite abandonment wounds in people as I'm working over my own and through my own. No, it's kind of interesting. So so what worked for me too were like those benchmarks of I sent her 20 pages at a time. I didn't like go back each time and like rewrite it. I waited till I got to the end to do that. But like having those little benchmarks, okay, it's like, here's where we're gonna talk about this 20 pages. And then, so we had like 10 sessions of those, total. And so it just kept me going along. It was like my little carrot that I needed to keep going along to write the whole thing and to show up. And I would say the part that I was aware of is probably like when I'm reading books, I like it when I am left with that yearning. As painful or sometimes as it is, it's like I'm like, oh, I can't put it down here. Like, so if there's anything like I was going for that, for the yearning of like not wanting to stop it then or at all. And so there would be moments like that she would make a comment or that I would be like, okay, I feel like that's a good one. It would just like be a knowing within, just like probably from having read tons and tons of books or that sort of thing. And also her help, her guidance. Thank you, Mary Nelligan. She would say like, this is a great way to end this chapter, or like, this would be a great way to end this chapter. So she would give me like kind of reassurance in some of the ways too, and as I navigated that. But yeah, I would just want it, like maybe a sense of longing for more. And maybe that is tied to my abandonment wounds.
I was thinking it was your art of seduction, because if you read this book, it's very clear. Yeah, you have a talent and gift that I've yet to ever harness or behold myself. So I was like, okay, well, can she like do another book on like how to get a man and keep a man and maybe be sexy? Because I'm none of those things. Never have been, not my strong suit. So I mean that's what I was thinking. Like, wait, how did she do that? Like, I do have a way of working with men that I'm not interested in. I can work a guy that I'm not interested. Like, yes, like same thing. Look at you. You're buying my lunch. You want to buy my lunch today, right? But the moment I'm actually interested in being attracted to the person, brains go to mush. No swag, no charm, no sophistication, just a complete ogre I become. It's so uncomfortable. And I've seen it on video, so I know that it's true. But I've seen it unfold on video, I should say. So I will say, like, I was thinking that too. I'm like, oh, so it's probably a part of your art of seduction that you clearly possess. As we start to close out a little bit, one writer to another, if I may ask you, what for you, like, can you talk a little bit about what your background in writing is? Like I said, if anybody has read, I really hope everyone goes out and gets a copy of your book. Not only is it available on paperback and available on Amazon, but you could also purchase it through Audible, Amazon's audio book app. Where else can people find your book?
Spotify. The audiobook is on Spotify as well. And a lot of the platforms. Yeah. Sex, Drugs, and Soul, is where they can find it. And I'm just searching like whatever platform they're using. What was your question though?
Well, and we'll link that in the show notes. But what I was asking is because you mentioned your editor.
Okay,
yeah. So you mentioned your editor and your writing background. For anybody, because this is a big question that I've gotten from a lot of people, right? And I have a workbook that I have online that it's like, I have it for like $50 on my website. And it's like, okay, if you're serious about writing a book, pay the $50, download this PowerPoint. It will walk you through everything you need from a publishing standpoint. But what I want to ask you is more so from the writing and editing standpoint is like, what is your background? And then you said your editor, like, is that someone that if someone was interested in writing a book and wanted to reach out to you or her, like what would be some of the opportunities there as someone who's interested in writing their book?
Yeah. So I've always had a love of stories and that sort of thing. And that's probably like we were poor for a good portion of my life. And so we did not have cable. So I read a ton. And it's also probably how I, blocked out some of the trauma or chaotic environment that was going on. I dove into stories and my imagination, which, and I had an active and vivid imagination as a child, like imagining like, sharks or lava or hunting dinosaur bones. And so that definitely fed into like stories and that sort of thing and world building later on. But I went to school for journalism. I've also always journaled, like I journaled from the 4th grade and on. I had the experience of like a stepmom reading it. And so I had to get over that too. Like I was like, oh, is my journal actually safe? So always journaling, journalism degree. And then I also took some writing classes through UCLA. I've always wanted to be a storyteller or writer in some sense. So I took some like writing classes through UCLA Extension, which has a great program like there in person and online, I believe. And I took acting and writing classes. I took an author accelerator book coaching type of course too. So I've always like had that realm. Right now, it's funny that you said like the first book or first something earlier, because I was actually published in someone else's name before mine came out, which I just think is kind of like God's hilarious way of being like, I gave you what you want. Were you specific enough? Because I was like, I want to be a published author. So I'm a ghostwriter, and I've written 4 for other people so far. I'm working on the 5th one for someone else right now. So if you're interested in ghostwriting a book, we can talk about that. I can also like guide you through the process. My editor was fantastic. I would highly recommend reaching out to her. That's probably more so she can help you like structure it along the way or after the fact. I did both. Like she helped me get there, and then I did a combing or like fine tooth edit like afterwards with her. Where I was like, mark up anything that doesn't need to stay and mark that red. And there was a lot of red. And yeah, so I just thrive with stories and storytelling in general. So if you have that yearning or desire, I say that it's there for a reason. And it's kind of like a way of our future self whispering that desire in the present moment. And we just have to meet that person. And I think that if your story is if you're longing to share your story, there's someone on the other side of that needs to hear it or receive it.
We'll make sure to link all of that in the show notes. So if anybody wants to contact you, find you, or your editor, we could go ahead and get you connected. And as we usher into our last question, this is a question I ask every guest this season. I really like it because I developed this philosophy I call Seth. So when you look at the phase that you're in right now, this current season, where do you feel strongest and where do you feel like you hope to grow more within that spiritual, emotional, financial, physical realm?
Mm-hmm. I probably lean towards or feel strongest within that emotional realm, and writing the book probably helped with that. And like also not shaming my emotions or just like giving myself permission to feel the emotions, and really just not judging them in one way or the other. And then I would say there's 2 that I feel like tied that I'm like leaning towards growing more in spiritually, because I'm in the heart of some transitions right now. And so it's like I want to just lean in more to that, like that growing that faith and trust as I'm dancing in the unknown more.
I'm so grateful to have you on today. Like, you are just so enlightening. You are bright. And I want to close out by Thank you so much. I do want to close out by just saying, reminding everyone and encourage everyone to check out your wonderful book, Sex, Drugs, and Soul. It's a testament to the transformative power of facing our shadows and finding our true selves. I want to thank everybody for listening today. Make sure you grab a copy of her book, and you can check out the show notes for more information on the items that we mentioned.
Yes.
Thank you for listening in to Eavesdrop with Ella. If today's episode inspired you, please subscribe, rate, or review Eavesdrop with Ella on your favorite podcast platform. While you're at it, you should also send this episode to a friend so we can connect with more eavesdroppers just like you. If you'd like to be a guest, you can visit ellaparlor.com to learn more. Until next time, this is Ella Parlor reminding you to stay resilient, stay abundant, and above all, stay balanced. Thank you for eavesdropping, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
You've been listening to Eavesdrop with Ella, a production of EP Consulting. Some of the products and services mentioned are paid promotions, and any advice should be confirmed with a qualified professional. Opinions and ideas are for entertainment purposes only and belong to EP Consulting. All rights reserved.